My sisters got a car for graduating. I got a bill for rent. I left without a word, but left a note. I am Jessica, 28 years old, and I still remember the moment that changed everything. My sister Amanda graduated college with honors. My parents surprised her with a brand new Toyota Camry, complete with a big red bow. For me, they had a different surprise waiting, an itemized bill for rent and utilities. No big deal, right? After all, I was always the responsible one, the invisible one. That night I packed my bags and left without saying a word. But I did leave a note. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever felt invisible in your own family. Growing up in our middle-class home in Westfield, Massachusetts, there were always subtle signs that my place in the family was different from my sister Amanda's. Our father worked as an engineer at a large tech company, bringing home a comfortable salary. Mom taught English at the local high school. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family in our white colonial house, with blue shutters and a basketball hoop in the driveway. But inside those walls, there was an unspoken hierarchy. Amanda was born when I was 7, and from the beginning she was special. With her natural blonde curls and bright blue eyes that matched our father's, she became the center of attention at family gatherings. People would coo over how adorable she was, while I stood quietly to the side holding my books. Jessica was always such an independent child, my mother would tell relatives when they finally noticed me. Never needed much attention, did you? Jess always content with your books and puzzles. But that wasn't entirely true. I wasn't naturally independent. I had learned to be self-sufficient because no one noticed when I needed help. By the time I was 10, I was making my own school lunches and doing my own laundry. Not because anyone asked me to, but because if I waited for someone to do it for me, I would have gone hungry or worn dirty clothes. The contrast in how we were treated became more obvious as we grew older. When Amanda needed help with homework, both parents would sit at the kitchen table with her patiently explaining concepts and praising her smallest achievements. When I needed help, Dad would glance at my paper and say, "You are smart, Jessica. Figure it out." For my 16th birthday, I received a practical gift, a used laptop for schoolwork. It was functional, and I appreciated it truly. But 3 months later, when Amanda turned 9, she got a lavish princess-themed party with 30 guests, a professional cake, and a mountain of presents, including the latest gaming console that I had quietly wished for but never mentioned. I started working part-time at the local grocery store when I was 15. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed money for the little extras that seemed to come automatically to Amanda. New clothes, movie tickets with friends, even school supplies. Mom would take Amanda shopping for new outfits each season, while I wore hand-me-downs or bought basics with my own money. "It builds character," Dad would say whenever I quietly pointed out the differences. "Amanda is different. She needs more guidance, more structure. You have always been mature for your age, Jessica." I tried not to resent my sister. It wasn't her fault that our parents treated us differently. Amanda was sweet, if somewhat sheltered and naive. She had no idea of the privileges she enjoyed simply by being the favorite. Sometimes she would bounce into my room showing off her newest possession, completely oblivious to the fact that I had to work 15 hours to afford something similar. "You are so lucky you get to have a job," she said once when she was 14. "Mom and Dad never let me do anything fun." I bit my tongue, not bothering to explain that working at the grocery store, getting up at 5 a.m. to stock shelves before school was not my idea of fun. It was necessity born from the realization that I would never be given the things that came so easily to her. Throughout high school, the pattern continued. Amanda joined the cheerleading squad, and my parents never missed a game. I joined the debate team and competed at the state level. They made it to one competition out of 12. When I won second place in a statewide economics competition, my father nodded and said, "As expected, you have always been good with numbers." But when Amanda got a B+ on a science project, they took her out for ice cream to celebrate her hard work and determination. The message was clear. Amanda's modest achievements were celebrated. Mine were expected. By senior year of high school, I had saved enough from my part-time jobs to buy a used car. Nothing fancy. Just a 10-year-old Honda Civic with faded paint and a temperamental air conditioner. But it was mine, bought with my own money. I felt a strange mix of pride and sadness when I drove it home. Pride in my own accomplishment, sadness that I had to do it alone. "That is a practical choice," Dad said, inspecting the car with a critical eye. "Good gas mileage, reliable, smart purchase." There was no celebration, no acknowledgement of what it meant for a 17-year-old to buy her own car. Just a nod to my practicality, as if I had no choice but to be the responsible one. My relationship with Amanda remained complicated. I loved her. How could I not? She was my sister, with her infectious laugh and genuine heart. She would make me friendship bracelets and leave little notes in my textbooks. But there was always a distance between us created by the vastly different worlds we inhabited within the same household. She never noticed that I was the one who hemmed her prom dress at midnight because Mom was too tired, or that I was the one who drove her to her friend's house at 6 a.m. for a surprise birthday breakfast because our parents were sleeping in. To her, I was simply her big sister, who was always there, a constant presence in the background of her charmed life. I tried to talk to my mother about it once during my senior year. "Do you and Dad love Amanda more than me?" I asked directly one night while washing dishes. Mom looked genuinely shocked. "How could you ask such a thing? We love you both equally. Amanda just needs more attention. You are so capable, Jessica. So independent. Amanda is more sensitive, more fragile." I nodded and kept scrubbing the hot water, turning my hands red. There was no point in explaining that perhaps I seemed capable because I had no other choice. Perhaps I was independent because dependence had never been an option for me. As high school came to an end, I graduated at the top of my class. The ceremony was on a Thursday afternoon. Dad took a half day off work, and we went to dinner at Olive Garden afterward. 2 weeks later, when Amanda performed in the middle school play with just 3 lines, both parents took the entire day off and brought flowers and balloons. It was just how things were in our family. I had stopped expecting anything different. College represented freedom to me, a chance to start over in a place where no one knew me as the responsible, invisible daughter. I had been accepted to several schools, including one prestigious private university with a partial scholarship. But even with the scholarship, the cost was prohibitive, and my parents made it clear they could only contribute a small amount. "We have to think about Amanda's education, too," Dad explained as we sat at the kitchen table with acceptance letters spread out before us. "She will be looking at colleges in a few years. So I chose the state university, which was affordable with my savings, a small contribution from my parents and student loans. I would have to work throughout college, but I was used to that. The campus was only 2 hours away, close enough for occasional visits home, but far enough for independence. My parents helped me move into the dorm, dropping off my belongings and leaving within an hour. "You will be fine," Mom said, giving me a quick hug. "You have always been adaptable." The first semester was difficult. I juggled a full course load with 2 part-time jobs, one at the campus bookstore and another waiting tables at a nearby restaurant. My roommate Tasha came from a wealthy family and never had to worry about money. She would invite me to weekend trips and shopping excursions, not understanding why I always declined. "Just ask your parents for money," she suggested once. "That is what they are there for." I just smiled and said I preferred to earn my own way. How could I explain the complicated dynamic of my family to someone who had never experienced anything like it? Despite the financial strain, I thrived academically. I chose accounting as my major, drawn to the orderly nature of numbers and the practical career prospects. By sophomore year, I had a 3.9 GPA and had joined the accounting club where I met other serious students who, like me, were focused on their futures. Meanwhile, at home, Amanda was flourishing in high school. She had become head cheerleader, homecoming princess, and maintained a solid B average. My parents called weekly with updates about her achievements, barely asking about my own life. During my junior year, I got the news that Amanda had been accepted to Westfield University, a private school known for its beautiful campus and liberal arts programs. It was expensive, nearly triple the cost of my state university. "We have been saving for her education," Dad told me during a rare phone call, "and she got a small scholarship for cheerleading. We are so proud." I bit back the question that rose to my lips. Had they saved for my education too, or was I always expected to make my own way? Instead, I congratulated them and asked about the program Amanda had chosen. "She is undecided," Mom said. "You know Amanda. She has so many interests and talents. She needs time to explore her options. I thought about how I had chosen accounting because it was practical and promised job security, not because it was my passion. I had always loved history and literature, but those seemed like luxury majors indulgences I could not afford. By senior year, I was working 3 jobs while completing my degree. I rarely went home using work as an excuse to avoid the constant reminders of my second-class status in the family. When I did visit, Amanda's activities dominated the conversation. Her sorority events, her new friends, her classes. My own achievements were acknowledged with brief nods. "Of course you are doing well," Dad would say. "You have always been the responsible one." During my final semester, I met Marcus at the restaurant where I waited tables. He was a bartender working his way through a master's program in education. With dark eyes, an easy smile, and a quiet confidence, he was the first person who seemed to really see me. "You work too hard," he told me one night as we closed up the restaurant. "When do you ever have fun?" I shrugged. "I am used to it." "That does not make it right," he said simply. We started dating cautiously at first. I had never had time for serious relationships, always too busy working and studying. But Marcus was patient, understanding when I had to cancel plans because of work or school deadlines. He listened when I talked about my family, never dismissing my feelings or telling me I was overreacting. "It sounds like you have been the adult in your family for a long time," he observed after I told him about my childhood. "That is a heavy burden to carry." When graduation approached, I invited my family to the ceremony. I had done well graduating with a 3.8 GPA and already having a job lined up at a local accounting firm. It was not my dream job, but it was stable and would allow me to start paying off my student loans. They came, all 3 of them, dressed nicely and carrying a small bouquet of flowers. They sat through the ceremony, applauded when my name was called, and took me to dinner afterward at a chain restaurant where Dad had a coupon. "We are proud of you," Mom said, patting my hand. "You have always been so good at school." "Especially math," Dad added. "This accounting career is perfect for you." Amanda gave me a handmade card with a sweet message inside. It was thoughtful, and I appreciated it, but I could not help noticing that my graduation seemed like an obligation to my parents, rather than a celebration. After graduation, I faced a dilemma. My new job did not start for 2 months, and my student loans would come due soon. I had some savings, but not enough for a security deposit on an apartment plus first month's rent. Reluctantly, I asked my parents if I could move back home temporarily. "Of course," Mom said. "Your room is always there for you." So I moved back into my childhood bedroom, now decorated with my old high school memorabilia, and used as occasional storage for Amanda's overflow belongings. I got a part-time job at my old grocery store to make some extra money while waiting for my accounting position to start. Marcus had graduated with his master's degree and was looking for teaching positions in the area. We continued dating, our relationship growing stronger, despite my family's lukewarm reception to him. "He is just a teacher," Dad asked when I first introduced them. "What kind of future can he provide?" "A happy one," I replied, surprising myself with my directness. "And he respects me." Dad looked startled but said nothing more about it. I knew he was comparing Marcus to Amanda's boyfriend Tyler, who was pre-law and came from a wealthy family. In their eyes, Tyler was a catch. Marcus was merely adequate. As the weeks passed, I searched for affordable apartments, knowing I needed to move out as soon as my job started. Living at home again had reinforced all the old dynamics, with Amanda's needs and activities taking precedence over everything else. And then came Amanda's graduation day, the event that would change everything. Amanda's graduation from Westfield University was treated like a royal coronation in our household. For weeks beforehand, my parents talked of nothing else. They ordered custom invitations, planned an elaborate party at our home, and discussed Amanda's achievement with anyone who would listen. 4 years of college completed with a respectable GPA. Dad boasted to neighbors, colleagues, even the mail carrier. "She has worked so hard." I bit my tongue, remembering my own graduation just 3 years earlier, which had warranted a simple dinner out. No party, no announcements, just a quiet acknowledgement of a milestone that had been expected of me. In the days leading up to the ceremony, our house transformed into graduation central. Mom enlisted my help with everything from cleaning to cooking to addressing envelopes for the 30-plus guests they had invited to the after party. "You are so good at organizing," she said as she handed me a list of tasks. "I just do not know how we would manage without your help." I took the list without comment and got to work fitting in the preparations around my part-time job and apartment hunting. Marcus offered to help, but I declined, not wanting to subject him to my parents' thinly veiled disapproval. 3 days before the graduation, I came home early from work and overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. I paused in the hallway, not intending to eavesdrop, but arrested by the sound of my own name. "Do you think Jessica will be upset?" Mom was asking, her voice low. "About the car. Why would she be? She has always been practical. She bought her own car in high school," Dad replied. "Yes, but this is different. A brand new car is a significant gift." "We have been saving for this since Amanda was born," Dad said firmly. "Jessica understands that different children have different needs. She has always been independent. Amanda needs more support to launch her adult life." I stood frozen in the hallway, a strange numbness spreading through my chest. They had been saving for Amanda's car since she was born. Had they saved anything for me? Had there ever been a college fund? A car fund, any fund with my name on it? I slipped back out the front door, got into my old Honda, and drove around for an hour trying to process what I had heard. It was confirmation of what I had always suspected, but tried to deny in my parents' eyes. Amanda was the child who deserved investment. I was the one expected to make my own way. When I returned home, I said nothing about what I had overheard. I continued helping with graduation preparations, pasting a smile on my face whenever Amanda bounced around the house excited about her big day, and the surprise my parents had hinted at. The day of Amanda's graduation dawned bright and clear. The ceremony was held on the university's picturesque quad rows of chairs, set up facing a stage adorned with flowers and the school's banner. My parents insisted we arrive 2 hours early to get good seats, bringing cushions, water bottles, and snacks, as if preparing for a day-long excursion. I sat between my father and a family friend, watching as Amanda and her classmates filed in wearing their caps and gowns. She looked beautiful and happy, waving enthusiastically when she spotted us in the crowd. Despite everything, I felt a surge of genuine pride for my sister. She had worked hard in her own way, and this was her moment to shine. The ceremony lasted nearly 3 hours. Each graduate's name read aloud as they crossed the stage to receive their diploma. When Amanda's name was called, my parents jumped to their feet cheering and taking photos. Dad had tears in his eyes, something I had never seen before, not even at my own graduation. Afterward, we gathered for photos, Amanda the radiant center of every shot, my parents flanking her proudly, while I stood slightly to the side. Then it was time for the party at our house, where relatives, family, friends, and Amanda's classmates would celebrate her achievement. Mom had hired a caterer, something that had never even been considered for my graduation. The house was decorated with flowers, balloons, and a professional banner reading, "Congratulations, Amanda Class of 2023. A photo display showed Amanda's progression from kindergarten through college, with captions celebrating each milestone. As guests arrived bearing gifts and congratulations, I took on the role of unofficial hostess, directing people to the food, refilling drinks, and making sure everyone was comfortable. Amanda held court in the living room, accepting praise and presents with her usual cheerful grace. And then came the moment. Dad clinked his glass for attention, calling everyone out to the driveway for a special presentation. The crowd moved outside, forming a semicircle around a large object covered with a tarp. "Amanda," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion, "your mother and I could not be more proud of you. You have worked hard and accomplished so much. To recognize this special milestone, we wanted to give you something that represents the new journey you are beginning." With a flourish, he pulled away the tarp, revealing a brand new Toyota Camry Silver with a red bow on the hood. The crowd gasped and applauded. Amanda screamed in delight, throwing her arms around our parents. "I cannot believe it," she cried. "My own car! It is beautiful." Dad handed her the keys with ceremony. "You have earned this, sweetheart. Now you can drive into your future with confidence." I stood at the back of the crowd, my smile fixed in place as I watched the scene unfold. I thought of my used Honda purchased with money I had saved from years of part-time jobs. I thought of the student loans I was still paying off. I thought of all the times I had needed help, but never asked because I knew what the answer would be. Our Aunt Susan sidled up to me, watching the celebration. Quite a gift, she commented. Did they do something similar for your graduation? Not exactly, I said quietly. But I bought my own car in high school. Susan frowned. That is not the same thing, Jessica. Have your parents always played favorites like this? Before I could answer, Mom approached, overhearing the last part of Susan's question. We do not play favorites, she said firmly. Our daughters have different needs, that is all. Jessica has always been independent. She does not need the same kind of support Amanda does. Susan raised an eyebrow but said nothing more, moving away to get a drink. I excused myself to check on the food, needing a moment alone in the kitchen. As I arranged another tray of appetizers, Amanda burst in, her face flushed with excitement. Can you believe it, Jess? My own brand new car. I am so lucky. Yes, you are. I agreed, genuinely happy for her despite everything. It is a beautiful car. Maybe I can drive us to lunch sometime, she offered, twirling the keys around her finger. Once I get used to driving it. I would like that, I said, knowing it probably would not happen. Amanda's promises often dissolved in the excitement of her next adventure. The party continued into the evening, a celebration not just of Amanda's graduation, but of Amanda herself, the golden child whose achievements were always worthy of recognition. I played my part, the supportive sister, the helpful daughter, the invisible linchpin holding the event together. When the last guest finally left, I helped clean up while my parents and Amanda sat in the living room looking through her gifts and talking about her plans for the summer before she started job hunting. In my room that night, I called Marcus, needing to hear his voice to connect with someone who saw me as a person of value. How was the graduation? He asked. The ceremony was nice, I said, keeping my voice low. The party was elaborate. They gave her a new car. A new car? Marcus sounded surprised. That is a major gift. Apparently, they have been saving for it since she was born. I said, the words sticking in my throat. Marcus, I do not think they ever saved anything for me. Not for college, not for a car, not for anything. There was a brief silence before he spoke, his voice gentle but angry. That is not right, Jessica. You deserve better than to be treated as less important than your sister. Maybe I am overreacting, I said, doubt creeping in as it always did when I confronted the reality of my family dynamics. Maybe Amanda does need more support. Stop making excuses for them, Marcus said firmly. What they are doing is showing blatant favoritism, and it is harmful. You matter just as much as your sister does. As I lay in bed that night, Marcus's words echoed in my mind. You matter just as much. The simple statement felt revolutionary, challenging the narrative I had accepted for most of my life. What if he was right? What if I did deserve the same love, support, and celebration that Amanda received so naturally? Sleep eluded me as I replayed scenes from the day. The tears in my father's eyes when Amanda received her diploma, the new car with its bright red bow, the photo display that documented every moment of Amanda's life while containing only a handful of images of me. The contrast was stark, undeniable. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of the inequity, the years of being treated as less deserving, less important, less loved. And along with the pain came something else, a quiet, growing resolve that something needed to change. 1 week after Amanda's graduation celebration, I received the call I had been waiting for. The accounting firm where I had been hired wanted me to start the following Monday. The salary was modest, but steady enough to support myself and start paying off my student loans. I felt a surge of excitement and relief. Finally, I would have a real career and could move out of my parents' house. That evening at dinner, I shared the news with my family. I got the call today. I start at Patterson and Williams next week. That is nice, dear, Mom said, passing the salad bowl to Amanda. What day do you start? Monday, I replied. And I have been looking at apartments. I found a small one-bedroom that is within my budget. It is nothing fancy, but it is clean and close to the office. An apartment already? Dad asked, looking up from his plate. There is no rush, Jessica. You can stay here and save some money first. I think it is time I had my own place, I said firmly. I am 28, and I have a professional job now. Well, if you are sure, Mom said, turning her attention back to Amanda. Honey, tell us more about that marketing assistant position you are considering. The conversation shifted to Amanda's job prospects, by news quickly forgotten in the more exciting discussion of her potential career paths. It was a familiar pattern, one I had lived with my entire life, but somehow it stung more sharply now. After dinner, I retreated to my room to research furniture prices and make a budget for my move. I had saved most of what I had earned from my part-time job, but setting up an apartment from scratch would still be expensive. I was lost in calculations when a knock came at my door. Dad entered holding an envelope. "Jessica, your mother and I have been talking, and since you are planning to move out and start your career, we thought it was time to discuss finances." My heart lifted momentarily. Were they going to offer some help with my apartment? Perhaps a housewarming gift or assistance with the security deposit? Dad sat on the edge of my bed and handed me the envelope. "We have calculated your share of household expenses for the past 4 months since you moved back home after graduation." I stared at him, not comprehending at first. "My share of expenses?" "Yes, rent, utilities, food, internet. We have broken it down for you." With numb fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was a neatly typed itemized bill. Rent $600 month x4 equals $2 $400 utilities, $110 month. X4 equals $440 food, $300 month. X4 equals $1 $200 internet/cable, $40 month. X4 equals $160 total, $4 $200. At the bottom was a handwritten note. "Now that you have secured employment, please arrange to settle this account. Love, Dad." I looked up at him, searching his face for some sign that this was a joke, but his expression was serious, expectant. "You are billing me for living here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not billing Jessica, simply asking you to take responsibility for your share of the household expenses. You have been an adult for some time now, and with your new job, it is appropriate for you to contribute retroactively." "Did you give Amanda a similar bill when she moved back home after graduation?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Amanda's situation is different. She is just starting out, still finding her way. You have always been more independent, more financially responsible. So because I am responsible, I get punished with a bill, while Amanda gets rewarded with a new car." The words came out before I could stop them. Dad's expression hardened. "This is not about Amanda's car. That was a graduation present, something we had planned and saved for. This is about you taking adult responsibility now that you have the means to do so." "Adult responsibility," I repeated slowly. "Like working since I was 15 to buy my own clothes, like taking out student loans to pay for college while you saved for Amanda's education and car, like buying my own car in high school with money from my part-time jobs." "You are twisting things, Jessica. We have always treated you and your sister fairly according to your individual needs and personalities. You have always been more mature, more capable." Mom appeared in the doorway, having overheard our conversation. "Jessica, this is not about comparing you to your sister. This is about your transition to full independence, which you have always valued." I looked from one parent to the other, seeing them clearly, perhaps for the first time. They truly believed they had been fair. They had so completely bought into their narrative of me as the self-sufficient daughter, and Amanda as the one needing support, that they could not see the inequality that had shaped my entire life. "Let me ask you something," I said quietly. "Was there ever a college fund for me? Did you save for my education the way you saved for Amanda's car?" My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We had intended to," Mom began, "but circumstances at the time." "What circumstances?" I pressed. "What was different when I was going to college versus when Amanda went?" "This is not productive, Jessica," Dad said firmly. "The point is that you have always found a way to manage on your own. That is something to be proud of. And now that I have found a way to manage my new job and apartment on my own, you want me to also pay you back for the privilege of living in my childhood home while I looked for work." "When you put it that way, it sounds harsh," Mom said. "But it is simply about teaching responsibility." "Responsibility," I echoed. "Has Amanda been given a similar lesson in responsibility? Will she be receiving a bill for moving back home after her graduation?" Dad stood up, his patience clearly wearing thin. Amanda will learn responsibility in her own time and in her own way. Your sister has different strengths and weaknesses than you do. We parent each of you according to your needs. And you decided long ago that what I needed was to be treated as less deserving of support, celebration, or investment than my sister. I said, the realization settling heavily in my chest. That is unfair and untrue, Mom protested. We love you both equally. Equal love would mean equal treatment, I said, standing up as well. Equal investment in our futures, equal celebration of our achievements, equal support during transitions. But that has never been the case in this family, has it? My parents looked genuinely shocked by my words, as if they had never considered this perspective before. The silence stretched between us, filled with decades of unacknowledged inequality. I think you should take some time to cool down, Dad finally said. This bill is not meant to upset you. It is meant to help you transition to full adult responsibility. They left my room shortly after leaving me alone with the itemized bill and a lifetime of accumulated hurt. I sat on my bed staring at the paper in my hands, feeling something break and reform inside me. For years I had accepted their narrative, believed that I was somehow less deserving of their support and investment. But that acceptance had come at a cost to my self-worth that I was only now beginning to recognize. I called Marcus, my hands shaking as I dialed. They gave me a bill, I said when he answered, my voice tight with emotion. $4,000 for living here while I looked for work. They did what? His incredulity mirrored my own initial reaction. Please tell me you are joking. I wish I were, itemized and everything. Dad says it is about teaching me responsibility. The same responsibility they apparently do not think Amanda needs to learn. Marcus asked, anger evident in his voice. Jessica, this is beyond unfair. It is cruel. The worst part is that they do not even see it, I said, tears finally spilling over. They genuinely believe they are being good parents by treating us so differently. What are you going to do? I took a deep breath, wiping away tears with the back of my hand. I do not know yet, but I cannot stay here anymore, not after this. Can I come over tonight? Of course, you can stay as long as you need to. After hanging up, I sat in silence, the house quiet except for the sound of the television downstairs, where my parents and Amanda were watching a movie together. The contrast was stark. They were downstairs, a family unit, enjoying an evening together, while I sat alone in my room with an itemized bill for existing in my childhood home. In that moment, something shifted inside me. A lifetime of accepting less, of making excuses for my parents' favoritism, of believing I somehow deserved less support and love, then my sister crystallized into a single clear thought: I deserved better. And if my family could not see, that perhaps it was time to show them what my absence would mean. With that thought came a sense of calm determination. I would not argue or plead my case any further. I would simply leave, but not without making sure they understood exactly why. The decision to leave came with a clarity that surprised me. Once the idea took hold, I felt a strange mix of grief and determination that propelled me into action. I woke early the next morning before the rest of the family stirred and began methodically packing my belongings. I did not have much to take, really. Clothes, books, personal mementos that had survived multiple purges, as Amanda's possessions expanded to fill more of our shared home space. My laptop and the small television I had purchased for my room in college, the quilt my grandmother had made for me before she passed away. Everything fit into my car with room to spare, a fact that seemed symbolic of my place in the family, easily erased, leaving little evidence of my existence. As I packed, memories surfaced unbidden. The time when I was 12 and had won the school science fair, only to have my achievement overshadowed by Amanda's dance recital the same weekend. My parents had attended her performance, leaving me to take the bus to the award ceremony alone. You will understand when you have kids of your own, Mom had said when I expressed disappointment. Sometimes you have to make hard choices, and Amanda needed our support more. I remembered my high school graduation where my parents arrived late because Amanda's final soccer game of the season had gone into overtime. They missed my valedictory speech, catching only the moment I walked across the stage to receive my diploma. At least we made it for the important part, Dad had said, not realizing that my speech, which I had worked on for weeks, had been the important part to me. There was the family vacation to Florida when I was 17, planned during the same week as my SAT exams. You can take them later, Mom had suggested. This trip is important for family bonding. When I pointed out that I had been preparing for months and changing the date would disrupt my preparations, they decided I was old enough to stay home alone while they took Amanda to Disney World. The photos of their trip dominated our living room for years afterward. Each memory strengthened my resolve. This was not about the bill, not really. The bill was simply the final confirmation of what I had always known but tried to deny in my parents' eyes. I would always be secondary to Amanda, always expected to need less, want less, receive less. By mid-morning, my car was packed with everything I intended to take. I sat at my desk and began to write drafting and redrafting a letter to my parents. The first version was angry, filled with accusations and years of bottled resentment. I deleted it. The second was pleading, trying to make them understand the pain their favoritism had caused. I deleted that too. Finally, I settled on honesty. Simple, straightforward honesty, without anger or pleading, just the truth as I had lived it. Dear Mom and Dad, I am writing this letter because I believe it is the only way you might truly hear me. For as long as I can remember, I have been the daughter who was expected to need less attention, less support, less celebration, less investment in my future. You have always justified this by saying I was more independent, more mature, more capable than Amanda. But I was not born that way. I became that way because I had no other choice. When I needed help with homework, I was told to figure it out. When I needed new clothes, I was told to get a job. When I achieved something significant, I was told it was expected. Meanwhile, Amanda received everything I did not: your time, your resources, your enthusiastic support, your proud celebration of even minor accomplishments. The contrast was stark and consistent throughout our lives. Last night's bill for living in my childhood home while I searched for work is not the reason I'm leaving. It is merely the final confirmation that in your eyes, I will always be less deserving of your generosity than Amanda. The car you bought her, the college education you funded, the constant praise and support you have given her, these are all things a parent should provide if they can. I do not begrudge Amanda these things. What I cannot accept is that you never saw me as equally deserving of the same. I have paid my dues to this family. The bill you gave me last night was the final receipt. I will not be paying it, just as you never paid the emotional bill for the years of unequal treatment that taught me my worth was less than my sister's. I am moving out today. I need time and space to rebuild the sense of self-worth that has been damaged by years of being treated as less important, less deserving, less loved. Please do not contact me for a while. I will reach out when I am ready, Jessica. I read the letter twice, checking for anything I might regret saying. Finding none, I folded it and placed it in an envelope which I propped against my lamp where it would be easily visible. Then I took one last look around the room that had never truly felt like mine, even in childhood, and closed the door. Downstairs, the house was still quiet. It was Saturday, and my parents typically slept late on weekends. Amanda's door had been closed when I passed it, no sound from within. I hesitated at the front door, wondering if I should wake them, have one final conversation. But what would be the point? We had had that conversation last night and many times before in different forms. They did not see the inequality that had shaped my life. Perhaps they never would. I called Marcus as I put my key on the entryway table. "I am ready," I said when he answered. "Can you meet me at your place?" "I will be there in 15 minutes, he promised. "Are you okay?" "I will be." I said, surprised to find that I believed it. There was pain, yes, but also a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself, acknowledging my own worth, even if my family could not. As I walked to my car, I looked back at the house one last time. The white colonial with blue shutters and the basketball hoop in the driveway. The perfect American family home. From the outside, no one would guess at the inequality that existed within those walls, the invisible hierarchy that had shaped two sisters in profoundly different ways. I got into my Honda, the car I had purchased with my own money at 17, and started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, I felt tears streaming down my face, but there was no urge to turn back. Sometimes walking away is the only way to preserve what remains of your self-respect, your sense of worth. Sometimes leaving without a word, but with a carefully written note, is the bravest thing you can do. Marcus was waiting outside his apartment building when I arrived, his face concerned as he helped me unload my car. His one-bedroom apartment was small but neat, with bookshelves lining one wall and a comfortable couch that he had already prepared with sheets and a pillow. "You can stay as long as you need," he said, taking my heaviest bag. "We will figure this out together." I nodded, too emotional to speak. The reality of what I had done was sinking in. I had left home, cut ties with my family, stepped into an uncertain future. Yet despite the fear and grief, there was an undercurrent of something else. Something that felt surprisingly like freedom. That night, as I lay on Marcus's couch, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, I wondered what my parents would think when they found my letter. Would they understand? Would they recognize the pain their favoritism had caused? Or would they see only an ungrateful daughter, too sensitive, too demanding of equal treatment? The answers to those questions were beyond my control. What I could control was what happened next, how I would rebuild my sense of self-worth, how I would create a life where I was valued for who I was, not measured against someone else, and found wanting. As I drifted towards sleep, I realized that for the first time in my life, I was writing my own story, one where I determined my worth, not anyone else. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure, but it was mine, my choice, my path, my life, and that more than anything else felt like a beginning. The first days at Marcus's apartment had a strange dreamlike quality. I would wake up disoriented momentarily, forgetting that I had left home. Then reality would crash back as I registered the unfamiliar surroundings. Marcus was unfailingly kind, giving me space when I needed it, and company when the silence became too heavy. "What do you think they will do when they read the letter?" I asked him on the second morning as we sat drinking coffee at his small kitchen table. "They will probably call you," he said pragmatically. "Have you checked your phone?" I shook my head. I had turned it off after leaving, not ready to face their reaction. "Not yet. I am not sure I want to know." "That is fair," Marcus said. "Take all the time you need. There is no rulebook for this situation." By the third day, curiosity and anxiety won out. I turned on my phone, watching nervously as messages and missed calls loaded. 10 calls from Mom, 5 from Dad, 3 from Amanda. Numerous text messages ranging from confused to angry to pleading. The first voicemail from Mom was tearful. "Jessica, what is this all about? We found your letter. I do not understand why you would just leave like this. Please call us back." The second was angrier. "This is completely irresponsible behavior, Jessica. We raised you better than this. Your father and I deserve at least a conversation, not some dramatic exit and accusatory letter." Dad's message was more controlled but equally dismissive. "Jessica, this behavior is childish and beneath you. Whatever issues you think you have with how we parented you and your sister running away is not the solution. Call your mother. She is very upset." Amanda sounded genuinely bewildered. "Jess, where are you? Mom and Dad are freaking out. They showed me your letter, but I do not understand what is going on. Are you okay? Please call me, even if you do not want to talk to them." I sat on Marcus's couch, phone in hand, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to call them back to explain more fully, to make them understand. Another part knew it would be futile. They had spent decades justifying their unequal treatment of their daughters. One letter and a few days of my absence would not change that deeply ingrained perspective. "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked gently, sitting beside me. "Nothing for now," I said, turning off my phone again. "I need to focus on getting settled and starting my new job. I cannot deal with their reaction while I'm still figuring out my own feelings." The following Monday, I started my position at Patterson and Williams Accounting. The routine of work provided a welcome distraction, giving structure to my days and a sense of purpose. My colleagues were friendly, if somewhat reserved, and the work itself was exactly what I had trained for, challenging enough to engage my mind without overwhelming me as I adjusted to all the changes in my life. In the evenings, Marcus and I would cook dinner together in his small kitchen, talking about our days and carefully avoiding the subject of my family. On weekends, we explored apartment listings looking for something affordable within a reasonable distance from my office. 2 weeks after I left home, I found a small studio apartment in an older building about 20 minutes from work. The rent was at the upper limit of what I could afford, but it was clean, had its own tiny kitchen, and most importantly, would be mine alone. I signed the lease that day feeling a surge of pride mixed with trepidation. This was adulting at its most basic level, something many of my peers had done years ago. But for me, it represented a profound step toward independence from a family dynamic that had defined me for too long. That same evening, my phone rang with Amanda's number. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Jess, thank goodness. I have been so worried." My sister's voice came through, sounding relieved but uncertain. "Are you okay? Where are you staying?" "I am fine, Amanda," I said, keeping my voice even. "I am staying with a friend, and I just signed a lease on my own apartment. I start my new job last week." "That is good," she said, awkwardness evident in her tone. "Mom and Dad are really upset, Jess. They do not understand why you left like that." "I explained my reasons in the letter," I said. "Did you read it?" "Yes, but I do not get it. They have always loved us both. They never favored me over you." I sighed, not surprised by her perspective. How could Amanda see the inequality when she had been its beneficiary? From her vantage point, our parents' treatment had seemed normal, natural. "Amanda, I do not blame you for not seeing it. But think about it. Who got a car for graduation? Who had their college education paid for? Who got celebrated for every small achievement while the other was told their successes were simply expected?" There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I never thought about it that way. I just assumed, I do not know what I assumed, that maybe you did not want those things, or that you were more independent by nature." "I became independent because I had to be," I explained quietly. "Not because it was my natural inclination. Every time I needed something and was told to handle it myself while watching you receive help and support, I learned that I was less deserving, less important." Another silence, longer this time. "I never knew you felt that way," Amanda finally said, her voice small. "I always looked up to you, Jess. You seem so confident, so capable. I was jealous sometimes of how easy everything seemed for you." "Easy." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Nothing was easy, Amanda. I just got very good at hiding how hard it was because showing vulnerability in our family meant being told to toughen up while you were allowed to be supported through your struggles." I heard her sniffling on the other end of the line. "I am sorry, Jess. I truly never saw it. But that bill they gave you that was wrong, even I could see that." "The bill was just the final straw," I said. "It confirmed what I had suspected my whole life, that I would always be held to a different standard than you always expected to give rather than receive." "What can I do?" she asked, surprising me. "I do not want to lose my sister." Her question caught me off guard. I had been prepared for defensiveness, for her to take our parents' side unquestioningly. This openness to my perspective was unexpected. "Just try to understand," I said after a moment, "and give me some time. I need space from all of you right now to figure out who I am outside of being the responsible, invisible daughter." "Okay," she agreed softly. "But can I check in sometimes just to know you are all right?" "Yes," I conceded. "But please do not share my new number with Mom and Dad yet. I am not ready to talk to them." After hanging up, I felt emotionally drained, but somehow lighter. Amanda's willingness to at least consider my perspective gave me a fragile hope that perhaps not all family ties were irreparably damaged. The next day, I received a text from Amanda. "I gave the car back to Mom and Dad. Told them I would buy my own like you did. They did not take it well." I stared at the message for a long time, a complex mix of emotions washing over me. Pride in my sister's growth, sadness that it had come to this, a tiny spark of validation that at least one person in my family was beginning to see the inequality that had shaped our lives. Later that week, a letter arrived at Marcus's apartment, forwarded from my parents' address. Inside was a response from my mother and father typed on formal stationery. Dear Jessica, we received your letter and are deeply troubled by your accusations. We have always loved both our daughters equally and provided for you according to your individual needs and personalities. Your claims of favoritism are unfounded and frankly hurtful to us as parents, who have only ever wanted the best for both our children. The differences in how we parented you and Amanda were based on your different temperaments and needs, not on any preference for one over the other. The bill we presented was simply meant as a lesson in financial responsibility now that you have entered the professional world. It was never our intention to hurt you or make you feel undervalued. We are concerned about the influence Marcus may be having on your perspective. This behavior is not like you, Jessica. You have always been rational and understanding, not prone to emotional outbursts and dramatic gestures, like leaving home without proper discussion. We hope you will reconsider your position and come home so we can discuss this as a family. Running away from problems is never the solution. Love, Mom and Dad. I read the letter twice, then handed it to Marcus without comment. He scanned it quickly, his expression darkening. They still do not get it, he said, setting the letter aside. They are making this about me influencing you rather than acknowledging their own behavior. They never will get it, I said, a strange calm settling over me. They are so convinced of their own narrative that they cannot see any other perspective. Even now they are characterizing my leaving as an emotional outburst and dramatic gesture, rather than a reasoned decision based on years of unequal treatment. What will you do? Nothing, I replied. I said in my letter that I would contact them when I was ready. I am not ready yet. The following week, I moved into my studio apartment. Marcus helped me set up the few pieces of furniture I had purchased secondhand. A bed, a small table with 2 chairs, a desk for my laptop. It was sparse but functional. And most importantly, it was mine. A space where I could begin to rebuild my sense of self-worth away from the shadow of family expectations and comparisons. As I hung my grandmother's quilt on the wall, the only real decoration in the otherwise plain room, I felt a sense of peace mingled with grief. This was not how I had imagined my relationship with my family would evolve. But perhaps it was necessary, this painful separation, this reclaiming of my value as an individual, rather than as the less favored daughter. That night alone in my new apartment, I looked around at the small space that represented my independence and allowed myself to cry properly for the first time since leaving. I cried for the little girl who had learned too early that her needs were secondary, for the teenager who had worked multiple jobs while watching her sister receive everything freely, for the young woman who had graduated college with debt and minimal celebration, while her sister received a new car and elaborate party for the same achievement. When the tears finally subsided, I felt emptied out, but somehow cleaner, as if the grief had washed away some of the accumulated hurt. This was the beginning of healing, I realized. Not an instant recovery, but the first painful necessary step toward a life where I defined my own worth rather than accepting others' limited valuation of me. The next morning I woke early, made coffee in my tiny kitchen, and sat by the window watching the sunrise cast golden light across my bare walls. There was something beautiful about the emptiness, the potential for new beginnings, the space waiting to be filled with a life of my own choosing. I sent a simple text to Amanda. I am okay. Thank you for understanding. Need more time before seeing Mom and Dad. Her reply came quickly. Take all the time you need. I am learning a lot about our family since you left. Miss you. It was a small exchange, but it held the promise that perhaps not all family bonds were broken beyond repair, that perhaps in time, new relationships could be built on more equal, honest foundations. For now, though, my focus needed to be on myself, on building a life where I was not defined by comparison to someone else, on learning to recognize my own worth independent of external validation, on healing the wounds of years spent feeling less than invisible secondary. It would not be easy or quick, but as I looked around my small apartment at the space that was unquestionably mine, I felt ready for the journey ahead, ready to discover who Jessica might be when she was not constantly measured against her sister, and found wanting, ready to write a new story, one where I was the protagonist of my own life, not a supporting character in someone else's. 6 months passed in a blur of work, new routines, and gradual healing. My tiny apartment slowly transformed from an empty space to a home decorated with thrift store finds and small treasures that spoke to my emerging sense of self. A vintage map of the world hung above my bed, representing adventures I hope to have someday. Potted plants lined my windowsill, their growth a daily reminder of my own. Bookshelves filled with novels and memoirs I had always wanted to read, but never had time for when working multiple jobs through college. At work, I was thriving. My attention to detail and strong work ethic had caught the notice of the senior partners, resulting in increased responsibilities and a small raise. The extra money allowed me to begin building savings and making larger payments on my student loans. Each payment felt like reclaiming a piece of my independence. My relationship with Marcus deepened during this time. He never pressured me to move in with him or rushed our natural progression, understanding that I needed to establish my own space first. But we spent most weekends together exploring local parks, trying new restaurants within our modest budget, or simply cooking dinner in one of our apartments and talking for hours. "You are different now," he observed one evening as we washed dishes side by side in my tiny kitchen. "More confident. You laugh more." I considered this surprise to realize he was right. "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I am finally becoming the person I was meant to be, not the person my family needed me to be." My contact with my family remained limited. Amanda and I texted regularly and had met for coffee twice, careful conversations where we began the delicate work of redefining our relationship as adults rather than as the roles we had been assigned in childhood. She had started a job at a marketing firm and moved into an apartment with friends, steps toward independence that I quietly celebrated. My parents had made multiple attempts to contact me, their approaches evolving from angry demands to return home to plaintive requests for reconciliation. I read their messages, but rarely responded, still needing the distance to strengthen my sense of self before engaging with the dynamic that had diminished me for so long. Then one Saturday morning in early autumn, a knock came at my apartment door. When I opened it, I found my parents standing in the hallway looking older and more uncertain than I remembered them. "Jessica," Mom said, her voice wavering. "May we come in, please?" I hesitated, my heart racing. I had not prepared for this moment, had not scripted what I would say when we finally spoke face to face. But after a moment, I stepped back and gestured them inside. They entered cautiously, looking around my small apartment with expressions I could not quite read. Pride, surprise, judgment. I offered them seats at my small table and put on coffee, grateful for the mundane task that gave me a moment to collect my thoughts. "You look well," Dad said as I placed mugs before them. "The job is going okay." "It is going very well," I replied, sitting across from them. "I received a raise last month." "That is wonderful," Mom said too brightly. "We always knew you would do well in your career." An awkward silence fell. I waited, unwilling to make this easier for them. They had come to my space. They would need to take the first real step. Dad cleared his throat. "Jessica, we have been doing a lot of thinking since you left. And talking. With each other, with Amanda, even with a family therapist." This surprised me. My father had always dismissed therapy as paying someone to listen to your problems. "Your letter," he continued, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "and you're leaving like that. It forced us to look at things we had never questioned before." Mom reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand when I instinctively drew back. "We did not see it, Jessica. Truly, we did not see how differently we treated you and Amanda. In our minds, we were just responding to your different personalities. You seem so capable, so independent from such a young age." "I became that way because I had to," I said quietly. "Not because it was my natural state. Every time I needed something and was told to figure it out on my own, while watching Amanda receive support and help, I learned that independence was not a choice, but a requirement for me." Dad nodded slowly, pain etched on his face. "I see that now. Or I am beginning to." When Amanda returned the car and started talking about how she wanted to be more like you, buying her own things, making her own way, it started us thinking. Amanda did that. Despite our conversations, I had not known she had explicitly connected her new independence to my example. She did, Mom confirmed. She told us she had never realized how much more we did for her than for you. She said she felt privileged was the word she used, and that she wanted to earn things the way you always had. I sat back, absorbing this information. So Amanda's actions made you see what my letter could not. It was both, Dad admitted. Your letter planted the seed, forced us to confront uncomfortable questions. But seeing Amanda choose a different path, one more like yours, made it impossible to deny that our treatment of you both had shaped you in profound ways. The bill, I said, bringing up the catalyst for my departure. Do you understand now how hurtful that was, coming right after you had given Amanda a new car for the same milestone I had achieved with no such recognition? Mom's eyes filled with tears. We do. It was terribly unfair. We had justified it to ourselves as appropriate because you were ready for adult responsibility, while Amanda needed more support. But those were just stories we told ourselves to avoid facing our own favoritism. Why? I asked the question that had haunted me for years. Why was Amanda always the one who deserved more? Was it because she looks more like you, Dad? Because she was more emotionally expressive? What made me less deserving in your eyes? My father looked down at his hands, genuinely distressed. It was not conscious, Jessica. When you were small, you were so bright, so capable. You learned to read early, figured out math problems quickly. We saw that competence and mistook it for emotional self-sufficiency. And then it became a pattern. The more you achieved on your own, the more we expected you to do so. With Amanda, Mom added, she struggled more with schoolwork, had more emotional ups and downs. We responded by giving her more support, more attention. And that became our pattern with her. We never stopped to question why we had such different expectations for our daughters. I absorbed their words, trying to determine if they truly understood the impact of their actions, or were simply saying what they thought I wanted to hear. That bill, I said again, returning to the symbol that had crystallized years of unequal treatment. Would you have given it to Amanda in the same situation? They exchanged uncomfortable glances. No, Dad finally admitted. We would not have, and that is exactly the problem. We had different rules, different expectations, different levels of support for each of you. It was wrong, Jessica. Deeply wrong. His direct acknowledgement caught me by surprise. I had expected more justifications, more attempts to explain away the inequality. This simple admission, it was wrong, carried more weight than any elaborate apology could have. We cannot change the past, Mom said, tears now flowing freely. But we want to try to build something better going forward. If you will give us that chance. I did not respond immediately, taking time to check in with my own feelings. The hurt was still there, years of accumulated pain that would not disappear with one conversation. But alongside it was something new. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but perhaps the willingness to consider that possibility. I cannot just come home and pretend nothing happened, I said finally. Too much has changed. I have changed. We are not asking for that, Dad assured me. We respect that you have built a life for yourself, one that you should be proud of. We are just asking for a chance to be part of that life on new terms with better understanding. What would that look like? I asked, still cautious. Maybe dinner once a month, Mom suggested, or family therapy together if you would be willing. Small steps at your pace with no pressure. I considered their offer, weighing my lingering hurt against the potential for healing. I will think about it, I said finally. That is all I can promise right now. They nodded, accepting this limited response with more grace than I had expected. We talked a while longer, careful conversation that skirted deeper emotional waters, but maintained a civility that felt like progress of a sort. When they left an hour later, I stood at my window watching them walk to their car, noting how my father's shoulders seemed more stooped than I remembered how my mother walked more slowly. They were aging, a fact I had somehow failed to register during our estrangement. I called Marcus afterward, needing to process the unexpected visit. How do you feel about it? He asked after I had recounted the conversation. Confused, I admitted. Part of me wants to believe they have really changed, that they truly see how their favoritism hurt me. Another part is afraid of being disappointed again, of opening myself up to more pain. Those are both valid feelings, he said. You do not have to decide everything right now. You can take small steps, see how it goes, protect your heart along the way. His understanding calmed the turmoil inside me. This was not a simple story with a clean resolution. It was messy, complicated, a work in progress, rather than a finished narrative. Over the next several months, I cautiously allowed my parents back into my life in limited ways. We met for dinner at a restaurant neutral ground, where our interaction had a defined beginning and end. We attended 2 family therapy sessions, difficult but productive conversations, facilitated by a compassionate professional. Slowly, tentatively, a new kind of relationship began to form. Not the uncomplicated reconciliation of a Hallmark movie, but a more realistic, mature connection, based on honest acknowledgement of past hurt and genuine effort to do better. Amanda and I grew closer during this time, our shared experience of redefining our relationships with our parents, creating a bond that had never existed before. She apologized for her obliviousness to her privileged position in the family, an apology I accepted with genuine appreciation for her growth. I never wanted to take anything away from you, she told me during one of our sister lunches. I just never realized how much more I was given. I know, I assured her. It was not your responsibility to see it. You were a child too, accepting the dynamic you were born into. My relationship with Marcus continued to deepen. We talked about the future, about possibilities that had once seemed remote when I was focused solely on survival and independence. The idea of building a family of my own, one based on equality and genuine seeing of each person, began to feel like something I might want rather than something I feared replicating. One year after I left home with nothing but a note, my family gathered in my apartment to celebrate my 29th birthday. It was a small gathering, just my parents, Amanda, Marcus, and me, sharing a meal I had cooked in my tiny kitchen. The dynamics were different now. My parents listened more than they spoke, asked questions about my work and my interests with genuine curiosity, rather than perfunctory politeness. Amanda shared news of her own growing independence with pride, looking to me with newfound respect. As we sat around my small table, I felt the weight of the past year, the pain and growth and slow healing that had brought us to this moment. The relationship with my family was not perfect, might never be. There were still moments of old patterns emerging, quickly acknowledged and corrected. There was still hurt that surfaced unexpectedly, requiring patience and understanding from all sides. But there was also something new, a recognition of my worth that did not depend on comparison to anyone else. A respect for my journey that acknowledged both the injustice of its necessity and the strength it had required. A willingness to build something new from the broken pieces of what had come before. Later that night, after everyone had gone, and Marcus was helping me wash the dishes, he asked, "Are you happy with how things are going with your family?" I considered the question carefully. Not happy exactly, but at peace with it. They are trying, really trying to see me clearly for perhaps the first time. That matters even if it cannot erase the past. "And what about you?" he asked. "Apart from your family, are you happy with your life now?" I looked around my small apartment at the space I had created that reflected my true self, at the man beside me, who had seen my worth when my own family could not, at the career I was building through my own efforts, at the independence I had claimed at great personal cost. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the certainty of it. "I am. Not because everything is perfect, but because I finally know my own value regardless of how anyone else sees me. That knowledge is worth everything I went through to gain it." Marcus smiled, squeezing my hand gently. "I always saw your value from the first moment I met you." "I know," I said, returning the pressure of his fingers. "And that helped me start to see it too. But ultimately, I had to recognize it for myself. That is what leaving home gave me. Not just distance from their expectations, but space to discover my own worth." As we finished the dishes in comfortable silence, I thought about the note I had left a year ago, the words that had finally forced my family to see what had been invisible to them for decades. Sometimes it takes leaving without a word to finally be heard. And sometimes the hardest notes to write are the ones that change everything. In the end, the bill my parents had presented me, meant as a final lesson in responsibility, had indeed taught me something valuable, though not what they intended. It had taught me that I deserved better, that I was worthy of the same love, support, and celebration they had always given so freely to my sister. That sometimes walking away is the first step toward healing. And most importantly, it had taught me that my worth was never dependent on their recognition of it. It was always there waiting for me to claim it for myself. Do you have a similar story about family relationships that changed your life? I would love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of personal growth and transformation. Remember that your worth is inherent, not dependent on how others treat you. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the strength to stand up for your own value.